Hi, this is Dr. Gregory Sadler. I'm a professor of philosophy and the president and founder of an educational consulting company called Reason.io, where we put philosophy into practice. I've studied and taught philosophy for over 20 years, and I find that many people run into difficulties reading classic philosophical texts. Sometimes it's the way things are said or how the text is structured. But the concepts themselves are not always that complicated, and that's where I come in. To help students and lifelong learners, I've been producing longer lecture videos and posting them to YouTube. Many viewers say they find them useful. What you're currently watching is part of a new series of shorter videos, each of them focused on one core concept from an important philosophical text. I hope you find it useful as well. At the beginning of Book 4 of Plato's Republic, Adeimantus comes in with a challenge for Socrates. Socrates has been slowly elaborating this ideal city, and it's not the purely ideal city we ought to remind ourselves. It's sort of a second best ideal city as we see in Book 2. Be that as it may, it is a pretty organized place by comparison to most political communities of Plato's time, and indeed even of our own time, a very rationally organized community. And it has these people that Plato calls the guardians. There's the guardians who actually run the city itself. They're the rulers of the city. And then there are the auxiliaries or the lesser guardians. And this is the soldier class, the people who have a great deal of what Plato calls thumos. It's translated as the passionate or spirited element of the soul. It's the part that, as we see later in Book 4, that gets angry and in which courage resides. And those two classes effectively run and protect the city. Then we have this vast assemblage of all sorts of people doing other jobs, ranging from farmers to shoemakers to those who, sail from city to city, bringing in goods that can't be produced there. Everything else under the sun that you can think of. Those are the third class of craftspeople, as they typically get called. And within the city, the way it's arranged, the rulers rule, the auxiliaries protect, the craftspeople produce, and they all stay out of each other's business as much as possible. They do also earn a living, but for the most part, the guardians are not earning what we would normally consider to be a great living. And so this is where Adeimantus' challenge comes in. He says, "What is your defense, Socrates, if anyone objects that you're not making these people very happy, and that through their own fault?" And here he says something kind of interesting. He says, the city belongs to them, meaning they're the rulers of the city, but he talks about it in such a way as like it's their city, they own it. The way that a lot of people will indeed think of their government positions as if I'm the one who owns this, or that happens in the military as well and in the university. So he says, the city really belongs to them, but they get no enjoyment out of it as ordinary people do by doing things of this sort. Owning lands, building fine houses, providing them with suitable furniture and winning the favor of the gods by private sacrifices, and entertaining guests and enjoying to those possessions which you now spoke of, gold, silver, all that is customary for those who are expecting to be happy. So, the ruling class are not getting the perks. They're not getting distinctive benefits that you would think they deserve. They're doing extra work. They're in charge of things. They're taking on greater responsibilities. Why are they not getting a bigger piece of the pie? Why instead does Socrates say, well, we'll let the money-making thing be for the craftspeople? The rulers are actually going to live a rather austere life. Why is that going on? This is stemming from a certain conception of how politics ought to go that Adeimantus is representing here. And Socrates has a broad answer to this that has a lot of other aspects to it. But first, let's look at the challenge. Socrates says, you know what, you're right. As a matter of fact, let me make the picture even more clear. They serve for board wages, meaning that basically what their wages are, they get to eat. They get food. They get put up somewhere, right? And it's not a fancy place. It ain't the Ritz Hotel. It's not some special room in the barracks or anything like that. No, they get the stuff just like everybody else. And there's no possibility of advancing further in terms of these perks or benefits. He says they don't even receive pay in addition to their food as others do. So they can't take a journey on their own account if they wish, or make presents to their mistresses, or spend money in other directions according to their desires. Their sole reward is to get to serve. And now if you say that, I think a lot of people would be like, well, before you were talking about being a guardian, and I was like, that's the job for me. I like being in charge. And then when you ask people about it, they're like, and you say, okay, you're going to be in charge, but you're not going to get any benefits. And as a matter of fact, the ordinary people are going to have it better materially than you are. They'll be like, I don't think I want to serve anymore. As a matter of fact, you give it to somebody else. Well, what's that a sign of? They're not really that interested in service for its own sake. They're interested in the perks that come with it. And that's a common mindset, isn't it? Now, Socrates says the goal for all of this is to produce the greatest happiness of the city as a whole, as a totality. It doesn't mean that the happiness of the citizens isn't important. There's a lot of interpretations of Plato that say, oh, he's a totalitarian, the individual doesn't count at all. That's all nonsense. If you read the Republic carefully, you see that Socrates is actually providing good reasons to think that the people in the city would in fact be happy. They won't be happy necessarily in the same respect that we typically, or the ancient Greeks typically framed it, in terms of having lots of possessions and social pull and getting to be, a big person or something like that. But they will have happiness as a whole, and we'll look at what that consists in just a moment. So Socrates says, listen, here's one of the implications of this. We are not just interested in the happiness of one class, namely that of the rulers. You could say that the city belongs to them, but it's really belonging in the sense more of a responsibility or stewardship than it is ownership. They're not owners of the city. As a matter of fact, you can't actually say that there is an owner of the city except the city as a whole. Everybody is supposed to be taken care of. Everybody's happiness counts. It's not quite the same thing as utilitarianism, where we would do some numerical calculation or anything like that, although Plato was quite fond of mathematics, as we all know. But it's not going to be the focus on the happiness of the ruling class. We have to think about what produces happiness overall. And it's fair game to say that within a city like this, we don't have to automatically assume mistaken conceptions of what happiness consists in. So that's not a restriction for us. And Socrates engages here in consideration of what the function of the classes are. So, he goes on and he says, we need to mold the model of a happy state. We're not isolating a small class in it and postulating their happiness. If we think about it in terms of, like a statue, for example, we were coloring it. By the way, ancient Greek statues, as we now know, were generally painted, not just the bare marble as we often see in museums. So he says that if somebody applied the most beautiful pigments to the most beautiful parts of the image, that would be the eyes, right? And he says, for the most part, they're not painted with purple, but with black. And now, why is this important? Purple is this dye that's difficult to get and very expensive, and so as a pigment, it would be, quite hard to come by. But you don't paint the eyes purple because eyes don't belong purple. At least the pupil of it needs to be black. That you can do with, ash, right? It's quite easy to make black pigment. So he goes on and he says, don't expect us, quaint friend, to paint the eyes so fine they will not be like eyes at all, nor the other parts, but observe whether by assigning which is proper to each we render the whole beautiful. Kalos, ordered, fine, noble. Those are all translations of that. So he says, in the present case, you must not require us to attach to the guardians a happiness which will make them anything but guardians. Happiness that makes them no longer the class they are is not really going to be good for them, and it's not going to be good for the city. What would that look like? Well, think about the happiness of the imagined lottery winner who now has millions of dollars at their disposal, and they go around, they buy up a whole bunch of stuff, and they maybe go into work and give their boss the big FU, the finger or something like that, and they reward the few coworkers who are nice, and they punish the coworkers who are mean, and all this sort of stuff. That is not really compatible with the function of a guardian. What is the function of the guardian? To use their intelligence to arrange the city properly, to deal with crises and new situations, to do planning, all of that sort of stuff. And people do indeed enjoy that sort of thing, don't they? There are some people, not everybody does. Not everybody likes to balance their accounts. Not everybody likes to plan for the future. But there are some. And those are the people that you want in charge. Those are the people you want in the guardian class. Similarly, those of the lesser guardians or auxiliaries, you don't want them like sitting around playing video games all day, eating chips, getting fat, and taking it easy. You want them out in the field practicing their craft, whatever it happens to be. Could be firefighters, could be EMTs. I think they would fit into that class as well. Could be the soldiers, could be the police, could be whoever. The people who respond to dangerous situations and look out for the good of the city in that way, you want them doing that function. And similarly, even the craftspeople. Socrates goes on. He talks about, for example, we could clothe the farmers in robes of state and deck them with gold and build them cultivate the soil at their pleasure and make the potters recline on couches from left to right before the fire, drinking toasts, feasting with their wheel alongside to potter when they're so disposed. And we can make all the others happy in the same fashion so that the entire city might be happy, but urge us not to do this. Why? Why is that a bad idea? Because the farmer will not be a farmer, nor the potter a potter, nor any of the types that constitute a state keep its form. He says, there's also a consideration of importance here. If cobblers deteriorate and are spoiled and pretend to be the workmen, that they are no great danger to a state. But if the guardians are corrupted by their desire to make a buck and lord it over other people, then you've got real problems. You're not going to have a happy city because things are going to be screwed up. Likewise, if the soldiers don't want to go out and engage the enemy and protect the city, and remember, ancient Greece was a patchwork of little city-states that did in fact have to defend themselves against other Greeks, well, then you're not going to have a happy city for long because it's not going to be a city for long. So another thing that he says that's really quite interesting. Each class gets a share of happiness, a share of good living, a share of being fulfilled that is appropriate to its nature or that its nature admits of. So the idea is that you've got these different kinds of people, right? You've got the intellectual class, the warrior class or soldier class, the defenders, and then everybody else, who are supposed to be productive workers, right? Not just lay about drones doing nothing. And each of these types of people can be made happy by certain things. So what actually makes them happy? And here we have some considerations that are quite interesting. Some of these are in the text. Some of these we have to think about a little bit more, but I think it can be supported by the text. So one thing that Socrates talks about is appropriate wealth. Now, the guardians are not going to have any wealth, but what about the ordinary people, the craftspeople? So he says, one of the things the guardians have to attend to is that people aren't too rich and that they aren't too poor. Why? He says, consider whether these are the causes that corrupt other craftspeople and spoil them. Wealth and poverty. So, think about poverty. How does that spoil the craftsperson? Well, the craftsperson doesn't have the means to attend to his or her craft and support themselves, that's kind of an easy one to understand. How does wealth screw them up? How does wealth corrupt the craftsperson? Well, he says that they're going to become idle and negligent. I mean, it's kind of funny when you think about, this is a little bit of a digression here, the reluctance to help out the working poor in a lot of cases. We're going to give them a handout and that's going to ruin their work ethic. Socrates and Plato didn't think that was an issue. They thought that, the ones who are rich are the ones who have the garbage work ethic. They don't do anything because they're rich, right? Taking somebody and elevating them from a situation of precarity economically into being solidly middle class. Back then, Socrates thought that's the best thing that you can do for craftspeople, to allow them to work their job with security. Not to have to worry about, am I going to lose my health coverage when I lose my job? Is my boss, going to run the company into the ground or anything like that? The idea is you do your job and you get some wealth in return and you enjoy the things that wealth provides, and that's good. Distinctive activities. Each class is made happy if they're actually well brought up, if they've got their priorities right, by doing the things that they have a talent for and enjoy doing. So the carpenter in this ideal city, it's not like people who don't want to do carpentry become carpenters. Again, the depictions of Plato's Republic as being this totalitarian republic where your jobs are handed out to you like, the Communist Party used to do back in the day. Total nonsense. Everyone in Plato's Republic does the job that they are most suited for, the thing that they have the greatest affinity for, the thing where they can get some, enjoyment and satisfaction out of engaging, that sort of stuff. If you like medicine, you're a doctor, provided you can actually do the thinking involved. If not, maybe you'll be an orderly. Maybe you'll be somebody else. If you're really good at cleaning things, you'll be a janitor, but you're going to get paid well. And you're not going to have people looking down on you because doing janitorial work is actually quite important. If you're well suited to being a firefighter, we put you right over there. So doing the things that actually make you happy is part of being happy. Sounds like a no-brainer, doesn't it? But that's the way that Plato's depicting it. I think there's a third way in which people within the city are made happy that isn't talked about right here, but you could think about it as running throughout the entire structure of the work, and that is being able to live in a good city. Being able to, on the one hand, look at your environment and your neighbors and think, oh, these are decent people. I'm happy to live here. They're not going to steal my stuff or treat me badly or get me caught in some sort of stupid bidding war of keeping up with the Joneses, conspicuous consumption, anything like that. And on the other hand, you can take pride, civic pride, in being part of this, larger whole that runs well and that looks out for everybody's happiness. So in Plato's Republic, and this is an ideal conception, of course, but in Plato's Republic, as Plato depicts it, as Socrates is narrating it, the citizens and the city as a whole are both made happy by the way things are arranged. And the rulers have to attend to all these things. So presumably, understanding this would be part of the education that the rulers themselves receive.